Mhm. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see some new faces in the, what do you call it? Anyway, in the gallery, yes. We have some presentations tonight, which is going to be nice. We have some staff, and Manuela's our CAO, clerk treasurer, and of course, Daniel. We just love having you. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 and note members present, which I did. I'll read the land acknowledgement now. We will begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We would like to recognize that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty territory, and the land on which we are gathered today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. Specifically, we acknowledge the neighboring community of Mishpicot First Nation, for whom we have great respect. We also recognize the contributions of all Indigenous people, including the Métis, in shaping and strengthening the community and province of Ontario. So we will start tonight with the Committee of the Whole. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to 3. Approval of the agenda. I need a mover. Councillor Cannon, second by Councillor Hoffman. All in favor? Thank you. Now we're going to start tonight with some very interesting presentations. We have 2, Ms. Paula Valois and Mr. Terry Gervais. We will start with Ms. Valois, and I see that Tracy's with her, from the Chadwick Home. Thank you for joining us, Paula. And we'll bring up the presentation on the screen, then you may begin. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is that broadcasting okay? First, I just want to thank Council for inviting me to come and speak tonight. I can't remember the last time I actually came to Council to do a presentation. It's been many, many years. So I'm a little nervous, but we will get through it. And I'm just going to ask Alec to move to the next slide, please. So I came to talk about intimate partner violence as an epidemic. Not sure if any of you remember this, but in 2015 in September the 22nd, there was a triple murder in the county of Renfrew. And 3 women were murdered. All of them had known the person, the man, previously in an intimate relationship. And he went, found the first woman at her cabin, and then he murdered her, and then went to the next one, and then the next one. And if you can imagine, this was, it's a small community, relatively speaking, right? Very, very rural. And the police, you know, it'd be similar to what we'd have here in our community, basically. They were pretty much reeling that day, trying to figure out what was going on, and trying to respond to all of these different crime sites. So I remember that day very vividly, because I remember that we were actually planning our Take Back the Night march for that day. And the news came on, and they said that three women were murdered, that there'd been a triple murder. And immediately my mind went to, I'm positive that they were all in an intimate relationship with this guy. And that's just where my mind naturally goes, just after working at the shelter for so many years. So not a lot of details were released, obviously, that day, but as time went by, that was actually the case, and that came out later on. So the next slide. So the perpetrator was arrested later that day and has been imprisoned ever since. In 2019, the coroner's office announced that the province would hold an inquest into the murders, and that this inquest, the CKW inquest, took place in June of 2022. The 5-person jury, after listening to 3 weeks of testimony and reviewing many written exhibits, returned the verdict that included 86 recommendations for change. Pamela Cross is a feminist lawyer, and she is an anti-violence against women activist as well. She's been working in the field for, I don't know, close to 30 years now. Our board has been working with Pam for the last 4 years as part of a project that we received some funding for. So she came to our board staff retreat back last year, and she did a presentation on the inquest itself and what took place. And it was over a 3-week period, like it said, right? So these people, the jurors, were, the average people from the communities surrounding, picked randomly. And they all came together for 3 weeks and listened to the testimony. And so basically what they received over that 3-week period was like an intense course in intimate partner violence. They heard from experts who've been working in the field for many years. They heard from people in the community, the victim services that were there, the police, the shelter, and they heard from Natalie Warmerdam's son as well as part of that inquest. So, for 5 people who'd really never really thought about intimate partner violence before, this was pretty intense for them, and they were attentive, I should say, throughout the whole 3 weeks. They asked really good questions, and when they didn't get the answers that they wanted, then they were very relentless in making sure that they kept at it and found out what they needed to know. And so after that 3 weeks was over, they came up with 86 recommendations for change, directed at various levels of government. And the first one, so you can go to the next slide. The first one was the recommendation that to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. So they found, after listening to 3 weeks of testimony and hearing just how pervasive this issue is, that was their first recommendation. And I thought, that was actually pretty brilliant, because I don't think any of the other inquests or juries hadn't come to that conclusion yet. So if you go to the next slide, 46 communities in Ontario so far have declared intimate partner violence an epidemic. And so communities across Ontario are passing resolutions, and it started off in Lanark County, actually. My friend Erin Lee is the director at the Lanark County Interval House there, and they're like neighbors to Renfrew County. So they obviously were impacted as well by what happened. And like me, they were thinking, this could easily happen here as well. We need to do something, and the community was reeling. So even just the announcement to actually have this inquest, some of the people that were impacted were feeling like, if we go through this and nothing changes, we don't want to do it. unless we actually see some change, right? So anyways, on July 20th of this year, Toronto declared intimate partner violence an epidemic. So there are already 46 communities that have declared it. And basically it's sending a powerful message to those living in abusive relationships that your community leaders have your back, and we support you, and there's no place in our community for violence. So go to the next one. I don't think you can read all of that, but I put some key facts. I just took it from the World Health Organization's fact sheet, so you can find it online. And I think I sent you links as well in the information that I gave you. So basically it's saying that 1 in 3 or 30% of women worldwide have been subjected to either physical or sexual abuse and intimate partner violence during their lifetime. So this can obviously, violence can negatively impact a woman's physical, mental, sexual, reproductive health, and may increase the risk of acquiring HIV in some settings. And violence against women is preventable. So the next slide has, again, something that you probably can't see very well on this slide, but over the last, God, I'm going to try to think how many years now. For many, many years anyways, the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses is it's a provincial organization that includes shelters and transition houses across the province. And they started collecting the names of every woman who has died at the hand of their intimate partner. So they started collecting this information many, many years ago. And at the time, it was basically the director of OAITH, which is the acronym for that stands for Ontario Association Against Interval and Transition Houses. She started collecting it. She started going through newspapers and online sources and that, and getting information from the different shelters. And so they kept track of femicides over the years. And now I believe Guelph University tracks that information. And so pretty regularly we get a report kind of letting you know how many women have been murdered that month, and how many women since the previous Women Abuse Prevention Month. So in this report, there have been 38 women so far since November of 2022 who've been murdered. In 2022, there were 52 women who were murdered. So that's basically 1 woman a week in Ontario alone. And when I'm just giving you this information because we know that, femicide is the ultimate, that's the end result a lot of times for women. But many, many more women are living every day in, in fear and dealing with the effects of violence against them and their kids. And many don't report it. They don't go to the authorities with this information. They live in fear and hide it from friends and family, or they think they are. So you can keep clicking through. Okay, so I want to just find something else. 1 second. So this is the stats that you have up on the screen are from 2021, but Kevin Fellinger just sent me some updated stats. So even the ones that are there, though, like they got called 105 times for domestic calls. And so the domestic calls may not necessarily mean that it's, perpetrator assaulting their partner. It may be a lot of different things, but they call it domestic in nature because it involves family members. So there were 105 domestic calls, 27 resulted in charges, and 8 were declared insufficient evidence to proceed. So all of that just to say that, it is happening in our community, and these are just the calls that are reported. So as you know, many women don't call the police. Usually when the police are called, it's because, things have gotten to the point where it's very, you know, imminent danger, or they've got neighbors that are calling. So, and then let me just see here what Wawa says. So they've had 63 so far this year, total calls, and 22 have resulted in charges. 39 were solved non-criminal. So, the police have been really busy. And I know that over the pandemic, things got very scary quiet there for a long time because everybody was told to stay home and stay safe, which was kind of ironic from my perspective from working at the shelter, because we know women aren't safe at home. So they were stuck there with their abuser, basically. And then once things started opening up a little bit, we've become a lot busier, and we've reached out a lot in our community. Like, we try to do a lot of different things to try to make our services more accessible for women, implementing a texting option, trying to do virtual, connecting with women virtually whenever we can. So all of those things, they came about because of the pandemic. I don't know that we necessarily we maybe would have got there eventually, but it kind of made us do things a little bit faster because of that. So, so the next slide, yeah, Chadwick Home's been around for, we've been in existence since 1985. We opened our doors August 1st, 1985. And I've been there since the beginning. Yeah, I think I started working at the shelter at July 12th, 1985, so a couple of weeks before we opened our doors. And so 38 years we've been supporting women and children in Wawa and in our area, Chapleau, Hornepayne, White River, Dubreuilville, the whole area. So, and our mission is to eradicate violence against women and to provide shelter and support to women and their children 16 years of age and over. But we also do a lot of other things. We do a lot of public awareness, and we run groups for women and young women and girls. So that's all part of our programming that we have. And like I said, we continually work to make sure that our services are accessible and inclusive for all women and children leaving their abusive partners. So this next picture, I just wanted to put this up because I found it on my computer. It was an old picture from, it was an action that we did. It was part of the 08th lobby that we used to do every November during Women Abuse Prevention Month. And so this time we decided we were going to put the name of every woman who'd been murdered by her partner since there were these serious cutbacks back in the 90s that really impacted the women that we work with. So we had a name on every single t-shirt representing every woman, child, friend of the woman who've been murdered since then. And we basically covered every single chair in the room. And this was that was the big room at Queen's Park that you can use to do press releases. So every single room, every single chair was covered. So there's been a couple of very high profile inquests over the years. Some of you might remember the May Isles inquest. That was in 98. And this was Arlene May, who'd been murdered by her partner. There were 213 recommendations that came out of that inquest. And 08th did have standing at that inquest as well. So that just means that they were able to provide information, and they were able to be in the room every day throughout the whole process. And they were able to submit some recommendations for change as well. And I believe that we put in 235 recommendations and they accepted most of them. A lot of the 213 were recommendations that OAIF put forth. The Gillian Hadley inquest was another one, and that one had 58 more recommendations. A lot of them, well, I shouldn't say a lot of them. That inquest was focused on a lot of housing issues as well through that one. And they also created the one of the inquest recommendations was to establish the death review, domestic violence death review committee in Ontario, which they did do. So, and that's been running for many years as well. And they've put out many recommendations as well. Not all of them have been implemented, obviously. But I mean, if they were to implement all 86 of the recommendations from this last inquest, we could probably eliminate violence against women in Ontario. So this is a picture of the monument in Petawawa, where a vigil was held. The last recommendation in this inquest was that all the parties come back together again a year after the first release of their recommendations to see and a report back on what has been done so far, because this jury really didn't want to see another report just sitting on the shelf. They wanted to see something happen. So I traveled to Petawawa for that, along with Pam Cross and the lawyer that represented they call it Ending Violence Against Women. It's an organization there. And we invited the provincial government to come, the federal government, and just to hear, you know, what they'd done so far. So the province released their report the night before. They didn't come to the press release, but so basically our feeling is that these recommendations are put out. They aren't they could be directed, and they have been directed at the province for accountability as well, and to various other levels of government. But that doesn't mean that they're the only ones that can do this, right? The medical officer of health could declare violence against or intimate partner violence an epidemic. And as you see, a lot of the different communities around Ontario have already made that resolution. So I had a conversation with Melanie Pilo, with the mayor, a while ago, and just put this idea forward to her. She seemed receptive, but she wanted some stats, so I provided that to her, and then I got invited to come tonight. So that's what I'm putting forward, is that the municipality of Wawa make that declaration and become the 48th community to make that declaration. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me today, and I want to thank Tracy, my board member, for coming to support me. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for your attention.
Paula, you just about overwhelmed me. Just give me 1 second. I didn't realize just how important this is. And I'm really glad that you came and presented this. And I'm sure we will help you on the resolution. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I commend you for all the work you've done, and I agree with Mitch. Without Chadwick Home, especially in this town, where would we be? If somebody is not fighting for those women, where would they be? That's a scary thought.
We're here doing the work, but we're not doing it alone. There's a lot of people, community members that support us, and the township supports us too. You know, we've had our Shine the Light on Women Abuse sign up at the municipality, and they always let us come and put our information out,
Yeah.
help us out in a lot of different ways. So we do appreciate that support, and we feel that support. So, and you know, our fire department too, they've helped us for years with our Take Back the Night March. And so we do feel the support. And I was confident when I came here tonight that I would get the support for this resolution.
Oh, I'm sure you will, Paula. I really, really appreciate it. The figures you gave kind of stunned me a bit. The 1 woman a week dying was really hard for me to understand. But thank you very much.
Have a resolution at the regular council meeting to pass the declaration.
Thank you, Manuel.
Back for that. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Jerva, I'm sure I'm not going to cry. I believe you have an update on the community risk assessment. Just bring your presentation up, and I'm anxious to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. And then thank you for the opportunity to come and present our findings on your community risk assessment for the municipality of Wawa. Can you just flip the next slide, please? And the next one. Okay. Just as a reminder, and we talked about this at the start of the process, that the community risk assessment became into regulation in July 1st of 2019. And what the regulation required all municipalities and the fire departments to conduct a community risk assessment by July 1st, 2024. Community risk assessment identifies and examines community risks from a fire perspective that differs from your hazard identification and risk assessment, or your HIRA, that you do when you look at your emergency management programs. So that's something that's important for council to understand, that you still have your emergency management HIRA, what talks about weather events and tornadoes and snow events. And then the community risk assessment is really looking at your community from that fire and life safety perspective. Community risk assessments are tools that can help municipalities to make decisions about fire protection services based on unique circumstances for their community. So this risk assessment is based on your community. It's not based on the other communities. It's based on what you have in your community, what risks you have in your community, and we develop what risk treatment plans you should look at for your community. Next slide, please. So the regulation that was put out by the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office has a very set of profiles and a very set scoring matrix that allows us to kind of work through your risks, put it through the matrix, and it at the other end becomes what your risks are. So it's not something that kind of the Loomis group said, this is what the matrix, we think it's a 2, should be a 4. It's really a set of criteria that we need to follow. The risks, the community profiles, the mandatory profiles, you see the 9 of them that are on your screen. And if you follow in along the document, each section is in there, and it talks about each one of those profiles. Next slide, please. So our approach and methodology, so we first put together a team of selected members that have all fire service, municipal experience, fire and life safety experience in our team, and the majority of them still being first responders. We did a data review, so we looked at legislation and documents and maps and reports, and we conducted site visits. So thank you to the chief and your CAO clerk. One of the things the community risk assessment is data driven. So we look at your data over the last 5 years. That's the kind of the window that we look at. But in order for us to get that data, we got to get it from somewhere. So the chief and the CAO clerk spent a lot of time getting us the data. The chief sent us reams and reams of data, and we come back at him and said we need some more. So we did spend a A colleague of mine was here early on and spent a couple of days. I was here about a month ago or 6 weeks ago for a couple of days, and then we're here again these last 2 days to work on the fire services review. Our engagement session, of course, was with the Fire Advisory Committee. We met with the CEO and the clerk, the fire chief, and the deputy fire chief with this particular process. Once we looked at and had all your data, we started to analyze the information. We considered best practices based on your information. We developed a draft CRA. We presented the draft to the chief and the CEO clerk, and then we presented it to the Fire Advisory Committee. And out of that, after some changes and some comments and questions, we developed the final CRA, which is what you have in your council package tonight. And then we developed also along with that, we developed some risk mitigation strategies that you can look at for your community. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about risk from a community risk assessment, it's defined as an event that could harm a community, an organization, the environment, health, or property. What the CRA will allow you to do is to understand what your risks are and that are most likely to occur locally and which are most likely to have serious consequences. When while I was in the fire service and when I served in the role as the fire chief, we all had a reason or what we thought might be a community risk or what would be risks in our community. We came to council lots and said, we think this is the risk and this is how we think we need to mitigate. What you now have is a qualified document that really shows you the actual true risks for your community for the fire services. After identifying the fire and life safety risks in your community, the municipalities can determine which risks are you going to mitigate or address and how are you going to manage them. And the municipalities base their risk management strategies on the probability of a given risk occurring and the potential that might impact in the community. Next slide, please. So this shows how we come up with some of the scoring, again, as set out by the OFM. So you can see on a likelihood score, and risks are set out by two things, consequence and likelihood. And each one, depending on what it is, can weight the risk. So you may go to a certain type of risk every year, so it's almost certain, but the consequence of that risk to the community is not large. Or you could reverse it. Maybe you don't go to that risk very often, but the consequence if it happens is very high. So that's how your numbers can move. So that's how we come up with your likelihood scores. When we did the document and we sat down, the chief and I sat down, we went through this document and the whole matrix, and there's a fairly large matrix in your council package. We went through every number and we looked at every number. We verified to make sure that what we thought for your community was right, what the chief thought for the community and the number of years that he's been here in his experience. Next slide, please. So, and this is how the consequence scoring goes. So is it insignificant? Was it minor, moderate, major, or catastrophic? And so again, it's if you look at the chart, it tells you very kind of pinpointed on which one of the sections you'd fall under in the consequence scoring. Next slide. So we end up coming with our risk level matrix. And as you can see, if it was rare and insignificant, it becomes a low risk. And if you go to the opposite end, obviously, if it happens every year and has a catastrophic consequence, it becomes very high. Next slide, please. So this is what we've determined the risks to be in your community. And remember that the risks are based on the likelihood and the consequence. So it could be likelihood could be low, consequence could be high, or it could be vice versa. So this is the risks that we found. The scoring, again, the 132 right down to 32, you can see the 0 to 150 risk level. Again, that's set out by the province. So you can see your top two that are into the red. One is 132, one is 96, and then you kind of go down into moderate and into low. Next slide, please. So once we knew the risks and we verified the risks and we were comfortable with the risks, we started looking at risk treatment plans. So how do you manage those risks that are in your community? How do you mitigate them, or do you accept them? Do you share them? So the risk treatment plan are developed by identifying the public risks. So that's what we've done. They're created by evidence-based approach that clearly defines the problems given the risk and considers the potential outcomes of the proposed actions, assess different options, provide recommendations for addressing the risk. And the risk treatment plans may recommend training, may recommend service delivery agreements, resource allocation, or service level changes. Next slide, please. So the risk treatment plan that was developed for Wawa CRA recommended at least one of the following risk treatment plans. So you can avoid the risk, so you eliminate the hazard altogether. You can mitigate the risk, reduce the likelihood or impact. You accept the risk and take further action. You can transfer the risk to another party, or you can share the risk with another agency, another community. So after reviewing the risk treatment plans, the Wawa Fire Department should develop and implement programs and services to mitigate each of the identified community risks. So without going into all the risks, I'm going to just kind of review the top 5, and that will give you an idea of how the risk treatment plans work for the top 5. So your risk number 1 is fires and vulnerable occupancies, your health center. So our risk treatment plan we're recommending is that you mitigate the risk. So the department should complete pre-incident planning for all vulnerable occupancies in the Wawa, and the department should keep record on completing inspections. The resources needed to implement the risk treatment plan is the department will need time and resources. Ongoing, it'll be the timeline. The department should incorporate the strategies in the risk treatment plan into its regular operations. So one of the ways to reduce the risk in fires and vulnerable occupancies is to continue to do the inspections and record the inspections, but to start doing pre-planning for the department, and so that as the firefighters, if they're called to these types of occupancies, they've pre-planned the building and they have an idea of what they can expect. Second one, please, next one. So road and highway incidents, no surprise that for your community that this is high on the risk treatment, or the risk for your community. So the risk treatment plan is to accept it and to mitigate it. So the department should ensure its personnel is receiving ongoing training to maintain its skills needed for resources on the road and the highway incidents. So you need to accept it. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can stop it. But we also suggest that you mitigate it or try to mitigate it as much as possible. Implementing the resources needed, implementing the treatment plan will require department's time and resources, and this will be ongoing timelines. So the department should incorporate the strategies in the risk treatment plan in the regular operations. So this part of the process, which help lead into the fire service review, doesn't mean they're not doing this today. What we're saying is to keep mitigating this. This is what they've got to do. They got to put time and effort into training for these type of incidences and incorporate it in their policies, in their procedures, into the regular operations. Number 3, please. So fire and explosion and propane or fuel storage facilities. So the risk treatment plan, we are suggesting that you can mitigate it. The department should inspect the Wawa's propane fuel storage facilities to verify they're operating in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. They should verify that the facilities have fire safety plans and a functioning fire safety equipment. The department should again conduct pre-planning processes for these facilities and keep all records that you're doing completing inspections. So again, time and resources, and it should be incorporated as part of the regular operations into their department. Number 4, fire in the downtown core. Again, not a surprise with the type of downtown core that we see in some of our older communities across our province. We recommend that you mitigate it. We're recommending to help mitigate is the department should conduct routine inspections on all commercial occupancies in the downtown core. The department should verify these occupancies that are required to have a fire safety plan, and the department can deliver fire safety messages to the occupancies of these buildings. Again, it's going to take time and resources, and it should be included in the regular day-to-day operations of the department. Number 5, fire and vulnerable occupancy, your long-term care. Again, mitigate, similar to your vulnerable occupancy, which was your number 1 risk, is to continue with pre-planning those processes for the firefighters. Make sure you're keeping records of all the inspections. One of the things about your vulnerable occupancies, and we didn't talk about doing inspections or drills there, it's already a requirement under the regulations, which your fire department is already doing as part of their requirement. So implementing will require time and resources, and of course incorporating the strategies into the regular operations. Next slide, please. So you've got this document now. What do you do? What does the chief do from here? So we suggested the department reviews the risks that have been identified in the community. We implement the risk treatment strategies to address and identify the community risks, review and update the municipality CRA annually. The legislation says you have to do it every 5 years. And what we're suggesting is that don't wait for 5 years. If you have a new hotel that comes to town, update that in your community risk assessment on an annual basis. It was a lot of work that the chief had to do. And so if you wait for another 5 years, it's a lot of work again. So we're suggesting that you kind of stay with it every year. And as the risks change, then you would change your risk treatment plans. If all of a sudden your likelihood score goes higher because you've had a number of fires in a certain type of occupancy, then your scoring is going to change. So you may want to look at a program that looks at those kind of risks. So develop a process to collect and maintain the data required for the municipality CRA. One of the things that is lacking in this whole process, and it's not unique to your municipality, is the way the data needs to be tracked for those 9 profiles. So some of it's really easy to get. Others, like the building stock, is harder to get. So what we're suggesting is start tracking that data the way that you need it for this community risk profile. You have a good base now. The chief has a good base. So as it changes, he can just change that building stock. And then you can use the municipality's area to develop future strategic plannings for the department. And we will use that as we move forward with your fire services review. Now that we've identified your risks, when we're bringing to council your service review and strategies for the future, we'll consider some of the risks that you have in your community risk assessment. Next slide, please. And Your Worship, that's my very short presentation. And if there's any questions with council, I'm certainly very happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jervie. Is there any questions, Kathy?
Put the airport at only 56%. Because it's getting so busy now, isn't that more of a risk at this time?
Your Worship, Councillor, that's a great question, because up to a couple of years ago, your airport didn't have the traffic that you have. So we can only go on previous data. So the number of calls the department goes to the airport, the type of consequence that you might have. But like I said, as it changes, as it gets busier, if you happen to have an incident at the airport, that's going to change your scoring, and that's going to raise the risk. Just because it's got a different score on it doesn't mean there is a risk treatment plan for the airport as well. It doesn't mean that you don't look at that. It just means it's a lower on the scale than it would be a downtown core fire, for example. So you're absolutely right. Your airport is starting to get busier with the traffic that's coming in. So the scoring quite conceivably could change. We also look at the numbers. So when you go at when you actually look at those consequence levels, when we sat down and looked at where the airport fall into them, when you go across the chart that's on 65 of the document, when you go across the chart, that's what the numbers ended up based on the province's matrix consequent levels. So you don't ignore it. You don't ignore it. But
And you don't wait for an incident.
no, and if I may, I can. It is number 3 from the bottom. So just to go through what we're recommending is a risk treatment plan for the airport, for example. So we're recommending that the risk treatment plan should be accepted and mitigated. So you should accept the risk because it's very viable to your community. But we suggest that you mitigate it as well. And the risk treatment plan we're saying is the department should ensure its members maintain the appropriate level of training regarding responses to the airport and the float plane incidents, and of course time, resources, and regular operations. So even in the last couple of days, the chief and I have talked about what kind of training you should have you require for an airport emergency, and we've got some strategies on going forward to help get some training for the firefighters. I did go out to the airport myself today with one of your staff and got a tour, and we're going to be looking at the airport operations manual and some of that to kind of help out with the municipality as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other question? I have a question. Mr. Jervie, I'm looking at all this work, and it's a little overwhelming. Like our chief, our fire chief also does other things. Like, how much does the province want to put on our shoulders? Like, are we able to do it? Or is this where you guys come in to help us? Like, I'm not exactly sure what is happening. Do you understand my question? It could be
And a very fair question as well too. So part of I applaud the chief for taking the kind of the initiative to do your community risk assessment and your fire service review at the same time. Because if you did one and then the other, it doesn't always work. So now that we've identified the risks, now we can start looking at the operations and doing that review and make suggestions. We all know that you can't turn a switch overnight, and there's, the magic wand's going to appear and everything's going to be kind of rosy, right? The other thing is some of this stuff's already being done today. So how do we leverage that? How do we keep moving forward? In the service review, we're going to look at prevention and inspections. That's going to be the part of it. We're going to look at responses. We'll look at responses to the airport. So I think the strategies to help you mitigate some of this risk will fall when you hear the fire services review. So that's the next step of the process. So we got what the risks are now. So how does this community manage it, given the resources that they have? So
okay. Thank you.
the chief was very right. I was going to say it's just a lot more work for him, but
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Derva. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I appreciate what Lomax is doing too, and our fire chief. Okay, next one is adoption of minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. Mr. Joe Wapato and Jim Hoffman. My mind went blank, I'm sorry. Item number 6, seeing none business arising out of previous meeting. We're going to move on to new business. Monthly reports, seeing none, moving on to number 8. Number 8, new business, a memo to council for travel to AMO Phenom Roma conferences. Manuela, would you like to speak to this, please?
So we're just asking for council to identify who will be going to these conferences, just because they book up very early, and if we don't get our requests in, you could lose your opportunity to go. So the Roma is January 21st to 23rd. It includes the mayor and 1 councillor. AMO is being held August 18th to 21st. Also the mayor and 1 councillor. And Phenom, May 6th to 8th in Sudbury. Also the mayor and 2 councillors. So we're asking this evening if anybody would like to put their name forward.
Manuela, I have a question on this. We went to Phenom last year, and everybody sat with their people at tables. Like, I could name different towns that had 5 or 6 different people from, but we could only have 2 go to Phenom and 1.
So
Is this a policy?
This is our travel policy. Council can certainly change it. They should also take into consideration the cost of sending that many people. If you have 1 or 2 people, or 3 in some cases, attending these events, there's no reason why they can't come back and report to the remainder of council.
Okay. You want an answer tonight?
I believe that the request was to have an answer this evening, yes.
Does anybody have any questions on this?
The resolution identifying who will be going would be passed on October 17th.
Yeah. Did you have any questions?
I'm not available for those dates, so I'm not going to be able to go to any of them. So.
Okay.
Okay, Jim, did you have any idea what you wanted to go to? Joe?
Right now, I'll be same like Kathy. I'm not available for those dates unless something changes.
I'm interested in Phenom, Kathy, Manuela.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. There are no in camera. There's none in camera tonight. So we move to number 10, business arising from the closed session. There is none. Next meeting date for council is October 17th at 6:30. An adjournment, closive meeting, closing this meeting at 7:19. I need a mover to close the meeting. Jim, Hoffman, and all in favor. I think I missed something, but that's okay. Okay. Can we just go right into the regular meeting, Manuela? Okay. Sure. Did I do something? Is it okay to go ahead? Okay. Open the regular meeting at 7:21. Note members present. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Is there any? None. Being none, we move into number 3, approval of the agenda. Manuela, you read.
Resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council scheduled for Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023 be approved as presented. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you. All in favor, thank you. I have a special announcement to make tonight, and I'm glad that the radio's here, and Paula and Tracy, I'm glad you're here to hear this. It has to do with our fire chief, Kevin Sabrin. We, on behalf of the Municipal Council and the Board of Directors of the Municipal Law Enforcement Officers Association of Ontario, I would like to acknowledge Kevin Sabrin on his achievement of the Municipal Law Enforcement Officer Certificate. He has successfully met the education, job responsibilities, and membership requirements as determined by the association. Congratulations, Kevin, and thank you for your hard work. Announcement, are there any announcements besides that? Do you have an announcement, Jim? Go ahead.
I don't know what we can do about it, but I've been told that we have a serious problem in our area. Hornpain, Wawa, White River, Duberville. We are having a problem with paramedics. We are short, and the ones we have left are burning out.
Oh,
This is all part of this is administered by the ADSAP board.
oh.
So I'm just putting it out there.
So we could look into it a bit?
Our mayor is on that committee.
Okay.
So, but
Is it that serious, Jim?
from what I've heard, we have a complement of about 8 in Wawa, but Hornpain has 2, and they're supposed to have about 6. Duberville, I think, has 1, or White River has 1.
Mm.
Our paramedics, if they have trouble down the line, they're getting called out to go to Duberville or White River. So that means if there's a call in Wawa, we have a longer wait time. So I'm thinking somehow we have to do something about it.
Yes, I think what could be done is, like, we can talk to the mayor at the next meeting, put it on the agenda to find out exactly what's going on with the paramedics. Can we do that, Manuela? Okay. Thank you, Jim. Adoption of minutes. Item number 6.1, Manuela.
Resolved that the following minutes of the meeting of council be adopted as presented. Minutes of the regular meeting of council held on Tuesday, September 19th, 2023, as contained on pages 1 to 7, inclusive of the minute book. Minutes of the special meeting of council held on Thursday, September 26, 2023, as contained on pages 1 to 3, inclusive of the minute book. Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Opato.
All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Item number 7, correspondence. Are there any questions on the correspondence? Moving on to number 8. Approval of the consent agenda. Manuela?
So resolve that the items listed under the consent agenda 8.2 and 8.5 be approved as recommended. Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Cannon.
All in favor? Carried.
Could I also, Deputy Mayor, please point out that the consent agenda also included the declaration, Resolution 23235, which
What declaration?
for this evening.
Oh, Paul. Okay. So you could read that one, especially for Paula and everything that you guys have done.
Thank you. So Resolution 23235, moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Cannon, whereas the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa recognizes the issue of violence in rural and northern communities as serious to the health and wellness of local families, and whereas Wawa Municipal Council recognizes the rural Renfrew County inquest as important to all rural communities, and whereas based on the overwhelming evidence of intimate partner violence in our country, or province, and our community, be it resolved that Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby declare intimate partner violence against women an epidemic as per recommendation number 1 of the Renfrew County jury recommendations.
All in favor? Carried. There you go, Paula. You could stay for the rest of the meeting, or it isn't much longer, really. Business arising out of previous meeting. Now, is this where appointment of deputy mayor? At the last meeting, we were asked to come up with a schedule for the remainder of this term of council between Councillor Hoffman and myself. Manuel, would you like to read the resolution, please?
Yes, sorry, Deputy Mayor, we missed 9.1 staff reports. We can go back to it after I read this.
Okay.
If you like. So resolve that Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby appoint the following municipal councillors to be deputy mayor for the term of council of November 15th, 2023 to November 14th, 2026 as follows. November 15th, 2023 to May 14th, 2024, Councillor Jim Hoffman. May 15th, 2024 to November 14th, 2024, Mitch Hatfield. November 15th, 2024 to May 14th, 2025, Jim Hoffman. May 15th, 2025 to November 14th, 2025, Mitch Hatfield. November 14th, 2025 to May 14th, 2026, Jim Hoffman. May 15th, 2026 to November 14th, 2026, Mitch Hatfield. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Opato.
All in favor? Carried. Now, Manuel, I have to go back to staff reports and memos.
Please.
Would you like to read the resolution?
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Hoffman. Resolved that Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby receive staff reports memo, SW memo amended to policy number MM001, arena ice use.
All in favor? Carried. Then I go to new business, Manuela.
Yes.
Approved declaring land surplus. Item number, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Rapato, whereas Section 270 of the Municipal Act SO 2001-25 as amended provides that a municipality shall adopt and maintain policies with respect to its sale and other disposition of land, and whereas policy AD002, sale and other disposition of land, was adopted by bylaw 3180-19 on March 5th, 2019, and whereas the September 28th, 2023 in-camera report proposed surplus declaration for the properties in the municipality of Wawa described as Plan M131, lot 1002, parcel 2807, AWSRP 1R4382, PR1RP 1R6820, part 2, roll number 577000, 003-27301, 000, 39 Algoma Street. Number 2, Plan M27, Lot 491 and 492, Parcel 5930, AWS 9CL2668, AWS, roll number 5776, 000-001, 03700, 0000, 96 Broadway Avenue. Number 3, MCSSM 5528, PTRP 1R2381, Part 1, Parcel 6890, AWS, roll number 5776, 000-012, 11800, 0000, 3 Maple Street. And the 4th property being location JC 477, Parcel 5808, AES, roll number 5776, 000-007, 14900, 0000, 135 Highway 17. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby declare the properties as described herein as surplus to the needs of the municipality in accordance with policy AD 002, sale and other disposition of land.
Well done, Manuela. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Item number 12, notice of motion. Seeing none, moving on to 13. Bylaws, Manuela.
Moved by Councillor Rapato, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to contrary notwithstanding. Bylaw number 363523, to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 3rd day of October 2023. Bylaw number 363623, to amend bylaw number 325519, Municipality of Wawa policy number MM001, arena ice use. Bylaw number 363723, to authorize the execution of an extension agreement between the Ontario Ministry of the Solicitor General and the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa for the provision of police services under Section 10 of the Police Services Act, and bylaw number 363823, to authorize the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa to enter into an indemnity agreement with the Fire Marquee, Inc.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 14, we don't have one this evening. Item number 15, this is not applicable this evening as we do not have an in-camera session. Business, item number 16, business arising out of the closed session, there's none. Moving on to 17, the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, October 17th at 6:30. Item number 18, adjournment. We will now close the meeting at 7:32. I need a mover.
Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the meeting close at 7:32 p.m.
All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you for staying.